All right. Welcome, everybody. I know we've got some other folks that are going to join here. So we'll just let them in as they come on. But I'm so grateful to be here with you all today. And I'm coming live at you from a new location. I've just recently relocated, so I'm still working on situating my space to do this work, but I'm feeling so grateful to be here and to be able to share with you today some really important information that's been coming through from the Greater Consciousness. For those that have been here following for a while, you know that I was really guided strongly in March to do these free calls every month, and then I moved in the middle of September, and I kept asking, my own inner guidance if I was skipping the month or if it was really important to make sure this call happened in September. And interestingly enough, there's been this theme for me of things needing to really happen in September. Not quite sure why that is fully for myself, but as I do my best to follow the guidance, I want to make sure that I'm honoring the guidance and information that's coming through for me and for you. So I want to just start by introducing myself to you if you haven't been on these calls before. I'm Amy White. I am an intuitive medium and a channel and a truth bomb dropper, among other things. And I have been channeling the greater consciousness now for the last several years. And before that was channeling and not channeling these energies and not really realizing who or what they were. And it wasn't important to me at the time, but about 2 years ago, the greater consciousness really started to let me know that they wanted to be called by name, and they gave me the name, the greater consciousness. So that's what I've been going with. So before we get into who the greater consciousness is and how this call is going to move forward today, I did want to introduce you quickly to Margaret. Margaret's here on the call with us, and she is going to be helping moderate the call, especially as we get to the end towards the questions and answers portion of the call. But Margaret will be monitoring the chat, so if anything comes up during the call today that you need support with, or especially if there's technical things going on, please don't hesitate to put the information in the chat, and Margaret will assist with that. Also, at the end of the call, I will channel for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then there will be time for questions from anyone here on the call. We actually have some questions from folks that have written in that couldn't be on the call today. We'll get to those. But when it comes to the questions and answers time, if you have a question does not have to be anything to do with the channeling that came through today. So if you have anything on your heart or any questions that are really feeling urgent or pressing for you, that would be the time to ask. And you can simply, when it's time, put a question mark in the chat box next to your name, and Margaret will help to facilitate the questions as they come in. So let's talk a little bit about the greater consciousness for those of you who haven't been on these calls before. The greater consciousness describes themselves as all of the wisdom that ever was, all of the wisdom that will ever be, and all of the wisdom that's here right now in this time and space in every human being. And so in essence, they are the infinite wisdom that exists both individually as well as on the collective. And what the greater consciousness is really strong with is tapping into the collective and the individual's inner knowing. And so they help to put words around feelings. They help to validate things that you may have already been thinking about or questioning, or that's already popped up into your awareness. And they also help to open up the door to possibilities and opportunities and thought process and belief systems that you may or may not be aware of. So each call is very different. There are times when I will be translating the greater consciousness. There will be times when the greater consciousness will speak through me directly. And they have been doing that a lot more lately, especially in these group settings. So I'm anticipating that that will come in pretty quickly into the conversation and start to speak directly through me. You'll be able to tell the difference really easily between when it's me translating and when it's the greater consciousness speaking, and there will be a little bit of a dance with that as well. I think that is all. Did I get everything, Margaret? Good, cool, thanks. All right, so I'm gonna take just a moment here, get myself a little more grounded, and the greater consciousness is already starting to come through as I've been giving my little housekeeping speech. But I invite each of you also to take a moment, feel your bottom in your seats, feel your feet on the floor if that's appropriate. Take a couple of deep breaths. Set your intention for the call today. What is it that you're longing to understand more deeply? What are the questions that you have? What are the things that you're concerned about or inquisitive about? Just put those out here in this energetic space, in this container that we're creating here in this community. So the first thing that the greater consciousness wants to bring into our awareness is that we are really at a very pivotal time. See, this is where my human communication skills start to wane a lot, but we're at a pivotal time here in history, in the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of humanity. And they are not saying this in lightness. They're not saying this as a kitschy spiritual agenda. This is, as they're saying, where the rubber is meeting the road. Now, the greater consciousness has been speaking for months and months about this increased energy, this increased time of shifting and changing, and how we are going to come into more and more recognition of things that we once believed to be truth that are no longer our truth. Things that we once thought were our path are no longer our path. Things that are no longer our heart's desire that were once our heart's desire. So when they're talking about this being a time of shift, they're talking about this being a time of shift. They're saying isn't even a big enough word. It's pivotal. It's the tipping point for many of us in the realization of not just our purpose for why we're here in this life experience, why we've chosen to be here in this time and space reality, but it's this big recognition of the truth of who we are that's coming into light in ways that are both exciting and also ways that can be shocking, especially for us, for those of us who have had a very strong hold, very strong grasp on what we believe our reality is, what we believe our purpose here is, what we think our path forward is. Now, all of this to say that yes, we're at a big shifting point. Yes, we're at a key time of our evolution. And it doesn't have to be a scary shift. It doesn't have to be this rug getting pulled out from under us. But what the greater consciousness wants us to be very aware of is that the practices of grounding, the practices of self-care, the practices of respite, the practices of kindness and compassion for ourselves first and foremost come into play now in ways that we haven't had to practice and apply those practices to our lives. And the difference between this next period of time that's coming, and I don't generally speak about time frames, but in the months to come, things are really going to continue to ramp up for us. This coming home to ourselves becomes the most critical thing that we can be paying attention to. And that doesn't mean that we turn off the rest of the world, but we hold the world and what's happening externally more lightly, more loosely around us. So as if we were wrapping a blanket around us very gently. We're not cocooning, we're not swaddling ourselves with it, but we want to wrap it around gently so that we can hold space for both what's happening outside of us and what's happening for us inside of us, and how we are focusing our attention in that manner, in a way that's balanced, in a way that allows us to be fluid, in a way that allows us to shift and ebb and flow as life shifts and ebbs and flows for us and around us. I think that the sense that I get is that everybody who's on this call is in some way, shape, or form feeling the energy ramping up. You know, here in the US, we're certainly coming up to the election time, and that is certainly supercharging things around us. And if we're paying attention to the news, or if we're consuming the news in any way, we're certainly adding to the collective ramping of that energy. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with adding to the energy. The more momentum that's flowing, whether it's momentum that feels high vibrational or momentum that feels lower vibrational, it's still momentum. And what's really important right now is the momentum. So the path forward isn't to shut everything down. The path forward is to find the footing in the increasing momentum so that we don't get carried away by what's happening, but we're able to navigate it in a way that allows us, again, to come back to ourselves, to be as present as we can in the moment, and to realize that there are higher things at play. Now, certainly the election in the US is only one of many things that's happening globally that's ramping up, that's allowing this energy to be ramped up. The greater consciousness wants everyone to know that this is all happening within divine precision. There's nothing wrong that's happening here. Now, again, they're speaking from an energetic, higher spiritual perspective. Evolution is coming from and through all of what is happening today in the world, with COVID, with the election, with Brexit, with all of the different things that are happening country by country by country, region by region. But it's happening in divine perfection, divine precision. And when we are able to lean into that knowing just a little bit more, it will help to smooth some of the sharper edges of energy that's here, that's been here, and that's going to continue into the future. They want you to know why this is so important, because right now there is a big shift that's happening, and they're saying it's a shift, but it's also an invitation. There's a big invitation that's here, that's happening right now for us to each individually take what the greater consciousness has been calling personal responsibility. And one of the things that's really, I laugh a little bit about the words personal responsibility because it's not sexy. Personal responsibility is not do these three things and you're going to have an ease and flow as we move through these next months of transition and transformation. But personal responsibility is the place, it's the gateway, it's the key to how not only each one of us moves easier through whatever is happening outwardly, but also it's giving us the opportunity to be able to create stability energetically for us and then all of those around us. Because when we're coming into alignment, when we come into a deeper alignment, we are actually radiating that alignment out into the world. And so there's a stabilizing thing that's happening here when we set the intention to be more and more in alignment, where we're recognizing the fact that we are actually empowered to make choices that can keep us aligned, that can keep us grounded, where we're making choices to not allow the spin and the stories and the news and opinions and all of the external things that are happening right now to be the primary focus. But when we primarily bring that focus internally to us through these simple acts of, as the greater consciousness was saying, this self-care, this compassion, this what feels best for me. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past, and they really want me to focus on this aspect of personal responsibility, which is the realization, which is the knowing that each one of us has a different, unique, and magical path that we're here for. And those unique paths, these ways that we're being led, each of us individually, well, it helps bring more energetic stability to the collective. It really is about our soul's unique journey. And what they mean by this is that as we are moving through this time and space reality, we each can sit down in whatever way feels good to us, and we can look at those things that are important to us, those things that we believe, those things that we hear that maybe don't feel so truthful to us. And regardless of if everyone is saying it's truth, we get to choose, is it our truth? Is it my truth? And when you can come into alignment with that, when you can come into alignment with what is your truth or what isn't your truth, and then you act from that place, that's where that personal responsibility aspect of this conversation comes into play. Because when we act from a place of what is aligned for us, what is resonating for us, what feels right, for us, then we can't make a wrong choice. We can't make a wrong decision. So it's really it's a different way of being. It's what the greater consciousness is introducing here is a way to be in the collective. It's a way to be in the collective, co-creating a peaceful experience without having to morph into the belief systems of the collective, without having to choose to follow what the majority of people are saying or doing or acting or believing. and be able to pick and choose those things that really resonate for you. It's like standing at a buffet and the person next to you is putting, you know, the kung pao chicken and the beet salad and the asparagus on their plate and feeling like you have to do that same plate. Or you can look at the buffet and say, I don't like any of those things, but I do like asparagus sometimes, so I think I'll try that. And then other things on the buffet really are what is drawing you. That again is the way that the greater consciousness wants you to understand this personal responsibility, this empowered place that we all stand right now to be able to make the choices that work for us. Now, it's a very different way. It's a very different invitation to the way that we've been conditioned as a society to act, you know. And the greater consciousness isn't saying you throw everything out the window and laws don't matter and rules don't matter. And what they're saying is be in a place of a child, in that wondering and that questioning. You know, I think about my children when they were little, and both my boys were so much into that why. Well, why? Why does it work that way? Why do I have to do it that way? Why does this happen this way? And so we can bring that into our personal practice and start to really assess, I've never asked why before, but why do we stop at a red light? Oh, well, we stop at a red light because that allows traffic to flow in another direction while keeping people safe. So stopping at a red light in this case would be co-creating a peaceful experience. And we know that not everybody does stop at red lights. And so sometimes they make it through the red light and it's fine, and sometimes they don't. But as they're doing it, they're co-creating their and taking their personal responsibility. They're making their choices based on what aligns with them. The greater consciousness recognizes that they're bringing in some pretty basic examples here, but they want to try to be as clear as possible about what we're being invited to explore and how that exploration can lead us to not only this coming into deeper alignment for ourselves and what it is that feels resonant to us, but also how that alignment really does help to co-create a peaceful experience. Part of this invitation is the invitation to not push against anything. We've talked about this a number of times on these calls in the past about how we can listen to other people's opinions. We can listen to the news. We can listen to the ideas and belief systems that are out there. And we can take the time to decide, is that my story? Is that not my story? And go from there. And so as we do that, as we decide this is not my story, then there's no efforting to push against, well, that's not my story, and my story is this, and my story is right. And you know, that pushing against is what takes us out of alignment of this personal responsibility. And the greater consciousness recognizes that this can be, this concept can bring up resistance in many people, because right now there are so many things that we can rise up against and push against and fight against. And that the greater consciousness is saying that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that coming into alignment and the taking personal responsibility allows us to pick and choose what things we feel inspired to be pushing against and what things we are doing it because we feel drawn to for other reasons. And so it's not a contradiction when they're saying this, because it's part of the process, right? It's that balancing of all of it in the same experience. It's the allowing ourselves to say, how do I create the most peace for me? And also honor what my soul is calling me to be doing, what my soul is pulling me towards. And there are lots of things that we're being pulled towards, again, individually. And in ways then, as we come into individual alignment, we can connect with communities that are in that same alignment, or we can connect with other communities that are in the same alignment in on different subjects. The stronger we can root ourselves in this understanding, the more ease and the more flow we will have as this energy continues to ramp up. And we will get to a place as we practice step by step by step to be able to really ride these waves in ways that are so much gentler than they would be otherwise. And so the greater consciousness is not saying that this is a time for us to find the bypassing of all of it so that we can just be in the space of everything's good and everything's zen, because that doesn't serve the evolution that our soul is here for either. We are being invited to find that balance point, that middle place between how do we engage in the human experience and how do we bring the soul experience into the same moment. And that is really the biggest piece of this conversation today. How do we hold both at the same time without trying to transcend the human experience for some higher vibrational Zen experience that isn't the full wholeness of the experience? And how do we not only be in the human experience? And for each of us, it's going to be very different. For each of us, it's going to be an exercise in finding that balance, finding that alignment. And some of that balance understanding comes from sort of listing to one way or listing to the other way, and then bringing yourself back into that center. And we each here, especially those of us who are on this call or who are listening to this call in replay, have been drawn to this particular event for the purpose of really understanding what are the next steps to get us through what's happening today in our own personal experience and in the collective experience. So take a moment or two as we're having this conversation to just touch into where that alignment is. Very often I'm drawn to even put my hand, sort of on my sternum or, on my heart center, and just feel into that space of where my soul alignment is and what it feels like when I touch into that alignment. How does it feel in my body? Because your body, as we've discussed before, is one of the biggest indicators for what is your truth and what is your untruth, right? What is resonant for you and what isn't resonant for you. And again, this is part of this personal responsibility of reaching into the toolbox that we all have and finding the things that will allow us to deeper and deeper come into this alignment. And the greater consciousness wants to say that this is a time like none other, but it will continue to be a time like none other. And while in many areas of the world, in many areas of the US, things feel like they've come back to some kind of normal. The greater consciousness wants to remind us to, again, hold loosely to any belief that comes up within you that wants to make you feel some level of comfort in the fact that, you know, we're through the transition, we're through the transformation. And again, not for the sake of creating any kind of fear or scarcity, but for the opportunity to continue to practice this being present in the moment, knowing that at any time life can shift and change for each of us individually and as the collective. And that's where this, again, this personal responsibility, this coming into alignment, this finding this grounding, this making the choices and decisions that feel right to you all come into play. Because while we may or may not be aware of it, though many of us are becoming more aware of it in the broader scope, that this uncertainty, this lack of control that we're all feeling, or many of us are feeling in this time-space reality, has always been here. It's just so much more visible now, because a lot of the veils of control and certainty and who is supposed to be taking care of us and protecting us and supporting us and looking out for our highest good, all of those veils are starting to fall away. And that's a good thing, even if it feels uncomfortable for many of us right now, because it is showing us more and more how we can find that space within us to find the certainty in the uncertainty, to find the control in what feels out of control, to find the ground in what feels to be an unstable foundation. And that is the place that we're being not just invited to explore and practice because it's going to help us through some period of time, but because that is what we're being asked to come into deeper resonance of, because that is how time will flow from this point forward. This presence that we're being invited to understand at a deeper level is the path forward. And it's not a path through anything, because ultimately we're not actually being asked to endure something to get to the other side of something. We're being asked to find the space of alignment now, because this is it. This is the flow for now, for the future. It'll continue to transform. It'll continue to transmute. And it won't always feel so challenging or scary or uncertain, because we will be able to be more grounded in it as we practice. But the greater consciousness wants us to just be aware of when we are focusing externally for these feelings of control, for these feelings of certainty, because that's not ever where they've come from, as they just said, but it's also not where we're going to find it. This invitation to come into ourselves is more profound than the greater consciousness is able to speak the words through me, though it will continue to evolve as these calls go on. They will help me to find better words, easier words, deeper words, even more resonant words to describe the message that they are communicating. But they're saying that what is being said today is also what we can all hear at this time. And so it's still and continues to be imperfection. But there will be more, and there will be deeper information as we move forward. And that's important to know, because the way that we join into community and integrate these messages and integrate this transformational time really is such a magical experience and such a gift for all of us. The one message that the Greater Consciousness wants to leave with us today is that no matter what things look like on the outside, things are happening around us, within us, below the surface, above the surface, in ways that are truly, and they're emphasizing exclamation pointing truly, transforming the human consciousness in ways that will unfold over time to be better and more magical and more collectively compassionate than we can even imagine from this moment in time, in this moment in time. And the reason why they want to say this and leave this message here at the end is that it's really important, as much as we can, as often as we can, to come back to that understanding. Now, I wanted to use the word knowing, to come back to that knowing, but the Greater Consciousness said understanding is a better word, because not all of us at every given moment are in the knowing that it's going to be not just okay, but better than we can imagine as we move through this transformation. But the invitation then is to have an understanding and to come back to this understanding, to hold on to that little bit of knowing, understanding, awareness that there are bigger energies, different energies, more energies at play here that are really leading this transformation. So as it feels chaotic, understand that there's divine order. As it feels heartbreaking, understand that there's healing. As it feels unexplainable, understand that there's explanation, and that it will begin to show itself for us each as the collective and the individual sooner than later. And we will all be riding this wave as the best we can as it's happening. There's so much goodness here for all of you. And it is so important to your health and well-being to find a way to understand and integrate that as best as you can in this moment and in the moments that are coming. I think we can move to questions now, Margaret. If anyone has a question, go ahead and put a question mark in the chat box. And Margaret can help facilitate that.
So far, there aren't any questions in the chat box, but we did get a write-in question about, of course, wondering about COVID and when this is all going to be over.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the question I think was answered during the call today, but we can reiterate that the pandemic and the COVID, this is just it's one snippet of time in the continuum of things that have happened in life experience to assist with transformation. The pandemic and COVID will end, and it will end sooner than most of us think. And it will end in lots of different ways, depending on who is asking the question and what their belief systems are. But this is not a forever thing. And to understand, as the greater consciousness was saying during the call today, that the benefits of this time and space are really truly positive. And again, the greater consciousness is aware of and is thoughtful in their response because they understand that there are certainly people whose lives have been lost because of the pandemic. And they're not making light to that or saying that those lives were lost in vain, but they're saying that this is all part of the process, and it will end. And we will look back on that snapshot of time for years to come with lots of different emotions. But it will be over. And like life, other things will come in. And so part of the discussion today about finding that place of coming into alignment so that there's not a waiting for something to end. There's not a waiting for some solution, but that we can act and be and live an adventure and experience life right now in the moment, regardless of the situations that are happening outside us. So I hope that that answers the question.
Okay, we do have a question in the comments here in the chat room. Is from Shelley. She says, "I'm in the middle of a big life change. Is this going to be good for me?"
Shelley, it's good for you now. And I know that's not always easy to hear because when we're in the midst of change, it can feel very uncertain and very scary and very confusing. But the way that things are unfolding for you, step by step by step, take it in as much as you can to what the greater consciousness is saying is to almost digest each piece of what you're experiencing one little bit at a time, knowing that it's the accumulation of all of those things that do lead you not just to surviving this change, but thriving because of it. It really is there really is such alignment with what you're going through right now, even if it doesn't feel that way in the moment. So what they're saying is to not project too far down the road with what could happen, what might happen. They're showing me like a decision chart where you are wanting to, like, if yes, go here, if no, go here, to, you know, next decision, next decision. And they're saying just take it back to one decision point, make the decision, or allow the decision to unfold for you, and then go to the next step, and then go to the next step, because that's going to bring so much ease. It's also going to lead you in a direction that you haven't quite yet contemplated, and something that is even bigger for your evolution, but also for where you have held this dream that you want to go. So just, again, just take it as slowly and as purposefully as you can without too much planning, and you'll find much more ease in this shift. Does that answer the question?
Okay, I have a few questions now here.
Okay.
So I'll get to everybody. I see you. First up, we have Sarah. Where are you?
In here.
Hi,
There.
Sarah.
Hi, Amy. I think actually your answer to Shelley helped me a little bit too, but there's a lot of change and turmoil going on, and a lot of it's been amazing. Right now, I'm in the midst of just something really hard, but there's also some potential, you know, with something new, and I don't know how to make space for something new right now. It feels like there's too much to make that emotional space for something new. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts around that? What are they thinking around that?
Yeah. So part of the shift that will give you a little bit of ease is to try to move as best as you can, and as gently as you can, as compassionately as you can for yourself, out of your thinking mind and into your heart mind. And I know that seems easier said than done, but what they're showing me is that because you are very invested in the things that are happening right now in the moment, that you're not able to really feel into how both how the things that you're experiencing are actually the gateway to making space, but also how, when you are so focused on the thinking, that you are not able to allow that space to open. So it's kind of it's like this, and right, it's letting the thinking mind slow itself down a little bit so that the heart mind can expand. That's how the space is created for you. And the easiest way for you to do that, and again, the words that they're using are grace, compassion, as much self-love and care as you can, to just be in the moment of catching yourself projecting, like they were saying for Shelley, projecting too far down the road, and just say, oh, I'm doing it again, and just like almost energetically pull yourself back a little bit. There's nothing that you need to figure out right now. You just can open the space up for less figuring out and more seeing how things present themselves to you. Does that answer your question, Sarah?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, gentle ease. They just use the words, and they mean this very thoughtfully. This too shall pass, but they really do mean that. This will pass, and more will show itself for you. This grace and ease, this grace and compassion, is so important. It needs to be, as best as you can, a practice that you put in place every day. Even if it's just a minute a day, to love on yourself in whatever way works for you, that's going to help to bring that, as they were saying, bring you closer in and allow your thinking mind a break. And especially when you move from the thinking mind into the judging. So just to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, seems we have several questions now. And I'm sorry, I was laughing there for a minute, not at you, but my mother, probably about 4 times a day, God rest her soul, used to say, "This too shall pass." All right, we have Suzanne. Oh wow, I had to go way back up there to get that one. Yeah, Suzanne, you're up.
Thank you.
Hey.
Hello. I actually got quite a bit from the Sarah and Shelley's answers. So it seems like the this is coming out differently, to focus on things that I didn't practice a lot in my early really trusting life, self-care, which is obviously a big coming through. And the other things are like play and just like really, really relaxing. Like I took a 2-hour nap today because that's just what my body needed, and I couldn't really come up with an excuse not to take a 2-hour nap. I really wanted to be here. So my question, I guess, is like this directive seems very clear, and yet like unease comes up. And most of the time I try to be with it, but I attribute it to, you know, live my life most of the time, you know, be productive and, you know, make money and blah, blah, you know, all that. And so, yeah, I'm just, you all have to say about this unease.
Well, the unease, I mean, and you already have answered your own question a little bit in that the unease is coming from the space of it being a very new way of being. And I think we've talked about this before, but what they're bringing through again is that right now we are all, each one of us, beginners. None of us have ever gone through this type of situation before, but we're also all in some ways, shapes and forms, awakening to this understanding that we're being invited to be in a different way than we've ever been before. And so the uneasiness is the ego mind, the thinking mind's way of going, hey, wait a minute. This is not, this does not feel good to me, because when I do this, when I drive, when I plan, when I strategize, then I feel in control. But you're asking me to do none of that. And now I'm like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. And so what's and again, going back to this conversation of personal responsibility, taking the time to feel into that unease and even have a conversation with it. Okay, I'm feeling uneasy. I'm not going to make you leave the room, right? I'm going to I want you to stay here because I know you've got good information for me. And almost start a conversation with that uneasiness that says, what is it that you're trying to tell me? What do I need to know you know, and it doesn't mean that what your uneasiness tells you is your truth, but that goes back to what the greater consciousness was saying earlier about coming into alignment. So your uneasiness says, we're going to live in a box, we're going to lose everything, we're going to, you know, be, you know, eating cat food, or, you know, what, like whatever your story is, and say, okay, now, but is that my truth? Like, is that my knowing? You know, and that's where it becomes very powerful, because then you come into alignment with it and say, okay, but I hear all the things you're saying, uneasiness, but where my alignment is that I'm in the right place at the right time right now. And so that's the practice. But don't push against it. You know, use it as a way to explore. Use it as a way to learn and to practice, because we're all in a place of practice of this new way of being. And the more that we, all of us, you, but all of us as a collective, continue to try to push and strive and drive and push the 100 marbles up the hill every day, the harder and harder it's going to be to sustain, because life is saying, this isn't the way anymore. You know, this is not, this doesn't work anymore for where we're going as a collective consciousness. And so, you know, congratulations on being on the path of exploring this new way of being. And uneasiness is your indicator that you're right there doing it. So that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, up next we have a question from Lucy. We're also undergoing a major move and major upheaval. Feels like a rebirth, but I still wonder if it's going to be positive outcome.
Well, Lucy, birth is a messy, messy thing. And it's for you right now, you know, the guidance has been consistent on today's call. The invitation is one step at a time, one step at a time. Make sure for you that each time you take action, that you really are coming into connection with, is this action for my highest good? For you, coming from a place of intentionality, what is your intention behind the action? What is the intention behind one step at a time that you're taking? Because that's going to help to give you an indicator of how things are going to feel moment by moment by moment. Yes, the outcome is good for you. The outcome is imperative for you, because a change needed to happen and needs to happen. And so you're following that path. But what the greater consciousness is saying about intentionality is so important, because when you come from a place with any decision that you make as you're going through this upheaval, as you called it, make sure that you're not coming from a place of fear or scarcity or lack of connection to yourself, because that's where you can get off a little bit wonky in your, and wobbly in is a better word, wobbly in the way that the path forward moves for you. So just make sure that you're really being intentional and purposeful and thoughtful and aware of each decision that you're making. That's going to help you along this transition. But it's good. It's needed. It's necessary. Excuse me. It needed to happen. So you're right on track.
Okay, next we have a question from Violet. Do we all have guides like the greater consciousness who are trying to speak to us, or is that part of the personal truth they're talking about?
You know, there's so many different energies that are around all of us. We do all, each of us have guides, and we each have connection to the greater consciousness, and we each have connection into this inner knowing, this inner soul, this inner wisdom. And in some ways, and this is where even for my human mind, it starts to get a little bit like hard to comprehend, but that it's all the same energy, and yet it's all different energy, and it's all within us and it's all outside of us at the same time. But our ability, each one of us, to connect into this knowing, to this energetic information, is there and available at any time. You can connect to your guides, and just so I don't talk about guides so much, because they're actually similar to the greater consciousness being one vibration and guides being another vibration, and souls that transition being another vibration. Not, I don't see them as like higher or lower or hierarchy, but they do come through different energetic energetic vibration for me. And so I the way that they show me is that also is the way that it comes through for everyone, and that we often feel the different energies different ways in different parts of our body, or in different ways that we translate the information. And so easier ways, sorry, my words keep getting a little bit twisted, but easier ways to connect to the energies that are there that have information for you is to start with not trying to put a name to them. So as I was saying earlier on the call, I never named the greater consciousness. I just felt the energy, and the information that was coming in felt so resonant to me that it didn't really matter to me initially, or at all, whether it was a guide or this infinite wisdom consciousness, or universal consciousness, or a soul who's transitioned. I just took the information that came through, and then if it made sense to me, for me to know what the energy source was, they made it known. And if it didn't, then I just took the energy's information and allowed it to flow in whatever way worked for me. And it feels to me the same for you. So it's the greater consciousness is having me sort of share my experience, because there's some very similar ways that you read energy to the way that the energy comes into me in my physical vehicle. So to be aware of that for you specifically will allow you to tune in deeper to the information that's coming in. Does that make sense? I know, Violet, you're on the call still. Feel free to unmute and answer or ask further questions. Ah. Do you want to unmute?
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Because I think just what I feel for you is that you're really quite connected, but you can get wrapped around more who's speaking to me, instead of just really allowing the information to come through. Mm-hmm. If you start there, the rest of it will sort itself out as you need to know, and it's not so important, they're telling me, whether it's a guide or universal consciousness or something else that is your, that's the energies that you're connecting with. It's much more important for you to be open to what information they're bringing to you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. 'Cause when I started to get more connected, I was just really sort of obsessed with the phenomena of it all.
I understand.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I've learned not to get caught up in the drama of that so much.
Yeah. But also that, what they're saying is for you, it's really important to have that spark, right? So allowing it to be fun and
Mhm.
adventure and inquisitive and like all of the things that really do light you up is
Mhm.
okay. As long as you don't get to so single focused that you lose, again, what they're saying is don't lose the message trying to figure it out, but allow it to be wondrous, because it really is. And the more you open to that feeling, the more it opens you to the information that's coming in. So it comes clearer, faster, easier when you allow yourself to be sort of inspired and fascinated by the process. So for you specifically, that really does play into it. So you don't have to shut it down. It's an important part of your process.
Okay, but it doesn't have to be so serious either.
Correct. It definitely does not have to be so serious. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That
Yeah,
helps a
and,
lot.
and actually what they're saying is, it comes back to the whole conversation of personal responsibility, and it's that coming into alignment and feeling the who you are in all of it, and then honoring that. For example, there's many different dimensions of me as a human, right? I probably drop more F-bombs than I would like to admit to. And, I love vodka, and I pole dance. And I've had to come to a place in my own personal journey where I can't allow sort of the expectations of everyone around me to define who I am, whether it's my human, self in walking through the world, or in this work that I do in the connection to the universal consciousness. I have to find the place that says I can be all of these things and still be all of these things, and not have to conform to what people expect. And very often, especially if we're doing intuitive work out into the world, there can be an expectation of how an intuitive or spiritual teacher should act or show up or be or dress or talk. And that's that personal alignment that they were talking about. You find the thing that works for you, and then you show up in the world like that, and you will be so open to all that needs to come to you, in ways that are bigger than you could imagine trying to just be a certain way in how you think you should be acting in certain situations, if that makes sense to you.
Oh, absolutely. I've had a lot of trouble with the fragmentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So coming into that, I love that word in the context of this entire conversation we've had today, because it's really that bringing together all of who each of us are, and living from that place, and as authentically as we can live from that place. That's where the magic is. So
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, a couple more here. This one has, it's long. So from Jessica, does the greater consciousness know what makes our higher power decide to take a certain person's life and not another's? In other words, why does it always seem that only the good die young, and then the not so good people get to stay alive? I have always struggled with this concept since losing my father at such a young age through no fault of his own. I do believe that everything happens for a reason, but this tragedy has always been something I can't seem to explain. I also wonder, excuse me, I also wonder if he really is with me, my mom and my sister, during these 20 years since he passed.
Jessica, I just want to honor what a beautiful, beautiful line of questions this is. And I'm asking for very specific words because I want to be super thoughtful, and the greater consciousness, of course, wants to be super thoughtful in this, in the way that this conversation flows. The thing about when a soul transitions is that each one of us, consciously or unconsciously, mostly unconsciously, comes into this life experience with some decisions made about how long and what experiences they want to have in this life. And very often, when those that we know to be good leave this life experience sooner than we would like, it's from a spiritual perspective, it's actually a huge catalyst for the evolutionary track of those that are left here in the physical. Now, there is free will as well, but very often, especially when there's a profound passing, it is something that is orchestrated and agreed upon at the soul level. And so while it makes no sense often within the human experience, and I want to honor totally and completely your human experience, yes, everything happens for a reason, but what's happened in your specific experience has been for a much deeper purpose, in that this passing has given the opportunity not just for you, but for others who are around you and who were around your father, to come to evolutionary experiences that they may not have otherwise come to in this lifetime. And so while it doesn't always make sense, and this isn't being said with the intention to make you feel better or convince you to come into acceptance of what happened, what the greater consciousness wants you to understand is that there is definitely bigger purposes at play, not just one purpose, but many purposes for this passing. And often that is the case when a loved one passes, that there is higher purposes for their passing, and that their choosing to exit the life experience is also for them a very evolutionary opportunity. So my human self would love to answer the question differently, but the greater consciousness wants you to know that your father's transition wasn't in vain, and that there will be times when it will be even more evident for you to see the growth and the healing that's happened in this last 20 years that only could have happened with this passing. The second part of your question, he's not just been around you all during this time, but he's been very much involved in all of your lives. And he shows me that there have been a number of times where he's come to you in your dreams, or he's come to you in your dreams, but not necessarily in his physical form, but you knew, or you suspected, or you felt that it was him visiting. And so just to know that when that happens, excuse me, it is him, but also to know that when you are in a space where you are doing things that you're are your day-to-day, everyday sort of things. So washing dishes or vacuuming or driving your car, and he pops into your mind, know that that is him visiting. That when that happens, when you're not intentionally sitting down and thinking about him, that's how he visits. And so pay attention to when that happens. And you're also being invited to start to explore having a deeper relationship with him in the non-physical. Now it feels like you do communicate with him regularly, or more like asking, are you there? Can you see this? Do you know this? But you can also start to ask other questions and inform this relationship at a deeper level for you. And that will be very supportive for you as you move into the future. So I hope that that helps. Feel free to either unmute and speak, or, okay, comment on the chat.
Yep. Jessica said, thank you so much. That is extremely comforting. You are so right about everything you said about my father. Your work is amazing.
Mm.
And go back up. A question from Manju. I'm sorry if I mispronounce. My daughter doesn't seem to know if she likes her school or not. What do I do? Which way do I guide her? Do I look for a different school?
Mm. What the greater consciousness is suggesting is that you allow your daughter to be a co-creative partner in this decision. If you aren't already, and it feels like you are, but if you aren't already having conversations with her that allow her to really speak her truth, because and explain to you why, and not just in the surface level, because there's some things going on beneath the surface with your daughter that it's really internal to her. They're making me feel like she's got a lot of questions. She's questioning a lot of things. She's in the process of, it's really interesting because it's almost exactly what we've talked about on this call today, is that she's asking a lot of questions about and wondering, well, why do I have to do things this way? And why are things this way? And why does it have to be in this process, on this path, in this direction? And so some of this questioning needs to be, she needs to have space to really verbalize it at like a very deep level, and with the feeling of being supportive. And the greater consciousness is not saying that you're not supportive, but that there's a different way that you can show up in conversation with your daughter, at the age that she's at, to be able to really allow her to speak her truth. Because a different school won't shift all of it, but to really allow her to be part of the decision, and to feel as though she's empowered to say, this isn't working for me, I would like to try something else. And then as best as you can to help her to either shift the situation where she's at, if a changing of a school isn't something that can happen, or to allow that to happen, and to give her, because what you're doing, this is what they're saying, is what you're doing is you're teaching her to that she doesn't have to stay in situations that don't serve her. And that will be a lesson that will serve her through her whole life, that she will feel empowered to be able to make choices, and not just go along with everything that's being said and every way that she's being directed. So if you are able to do this, I think that the more information will come from the conversation, and you will both be able together to make a choice. So I hope that that's that answers the question. If there's more, please let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do that, asking her, if she thinks a better school would help her.
Mhm.
And it seems like she's saying, I don't know at this time. And, that's where, I'm not able to, but I do honor her choice. So if at all she comes back and says that school is not working for me, I'm willing to, take a different route.
Sure.
But then her not knowing and then me not knowing what to do,
Right.
is like, okay, so what do we do now? What
Yeah.
do we do?
And I think that's where the guidance is coming through, that perhaps the question isn't, do you think a different school would help? But perhaps the line of questions can be something around, tell me more about what's what's causing you to really feel as though this school isn't working.
Mhm.
Because there's something happening there that she's not verbalizing or not really truthfully verbalizing, that she needs to be able to say out loud in a safe environment. And it doesn't mean that there's something bad that's happening, but again, it's that back to that she's looking at, there's almost like she's looking at the way that she's being instructed, and she sees some kind of hypocrisy or something that doesn't feel aligned with her. And so she's questioning it, but she also doesn't feel maybe like she's has the right or is empowered to ask those questions. And you may not have all of the answers, and it's really not about you having the answers as much as it's about her being able to ask the questions or voice what she sees. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
just let her speak up and allow
yeah.
her.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's if there's something like some special ritual or some special something that the two of you have done together. Maybe it's just an outing or brunch or something, coffee, something that kind of creates a space for you to say, I've been really thinking a lot about this thing with school, and I'm wondering if you can share with me, what's again, what is it underneath? What is it that's happening that's making you question whether this is the right school for you or not?
Mhm. Okay.
But creating a safe space for her to do it. And it might be, and again, what they're making me feel is that this isn't necessarily the way that you have spoken, or this isn't how you have sort of set up your relationship. So it may be a little bit of a new invitation for her. And
Mhm.
again, there's no judgment, but only that just to be aware that this could be something that's really new for both of you, but also something that's very transformative for both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's coming to me because, whenever she's in the school, I get all these text messages, different days, different times. So I know she's going through something, but I feel like, maybe, she's not able to capture yet what it is that she wants, or maybe she's not feeling comfortable enough to say, what she wants to say.
Yeah.
But she is coming through.
Good. And I would, and again, what's coming through to me is just to be that it's okay for you to ask the questions also, and do it in a way that says, I've been, in whatever way is age appropriate, but I want to honor your process, but I also sense that there's something maybe that we can talk through here that we haven't done before. Because there's something here that's really big for both of you to be able to enter into this little bit of a deeper level relationship. And what it does is it shows you both that you're really empowered to make choices from a different place than you've done before. So there's so much good there for you. And just take it a little bit at a time, and you test the water if you need to. But she trusts you. But she's almost waiting for you to ask the questions. So,
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay. Barbara wanted to ask a question. Oh, there she,
All right.
there
Hi,
she is.
Amy.
Hey, Barbara.
I have kids coming in and out, and I didn't want them to be a distraction, so
Yeah, no worries.
turned off. So, I appreciated everything that you talked about on the call, just the opportunities and the invitations, and I really feel like this time of the pandemic has created an opportunity for me to kind of go inward and focus on the nuclear family and my kids and my husband, and it's necessitated or allowed for some necessary moves on my part. I guess what my question is and what I have found is between the pandemic and the upcoming election, as you talked about, there's just a lot of polarization. Um, friends that you thought were friends that you're not sure that are friends, and I find myself going more and more inward, away from social media, away from the other ways that I have been able to stay connected with the people who typically would keep me grounded. Specifically, my family of origin. I have a very big family. We've always been very close. I'm 7 of 8, number 7 of 8. And we lost my mom. She passed just after my kids were born, about 9 years ago. And since then, the disintegration of the sibling relationship, and really even my father, has gotten worse. But specifically, I feel like now with this whole polarization of the election and how we all philosophically deal with, COVID and the pandemic. And I guess my question really is this the point at which, the cultural aspect of my being really close to my family, that I just need to sort of, cut the cord? Or I feel like there's, this choice of chosen family versus given family, and that I keep coming upon this, but it's been sending me into, I've just been really depressed and really struggling with how to manage that relationship and what's happening, not just for me, but for my entire family, witnessing it amongst my siblings and my father, as well as for myself.
Yeah, I think, the thing that comes through first and foremost is that part of the change, the shift in consciousness is that, excuse me, the idea of blood is thicker than water, family first, you endure what you endure because they're your family. That story is old and outworn, and it doesn't honor us in our human or soul experience. And so many, many people are waking up to this fact that the desire to make it work, and to hold together this family, because their family is actually has a very detrimental effect on body, mind, spirit, the entire thing. And so what you're being invited to do is to really explore this and to decide from that place of alignment we talked about today, what works for me. What you don't have to pull the plug, flip the switch, and never speak to them again, but you have to come into alignment with, this is what I can be in, and this is what I can't. And I can love them from afar, but I don't need to engage in debate about belief systems or what's right and what's wrong with the world. It's that what the greater consciousness was saying earlier about not pushing against any of it, so they can have their beliefs. And I introduced, it might have been last month, it's hard to remember anymore, but one of the mantras that I even use personally is, it's not my story. And so as I'm hearing somebody say something that isn't my story, instead of pushing against it and saying, that's not the truth, that's not, that you're not seeing it, it's, the right way, how can you believe that? I say, that's not my story. And then I can give grace to whatever story or belief that the other person or people or group of people are choosing to be in, and either they've come into some kind of alignment with it or not. And I can maintain my alignment with what I believe to be my truth. I don't have to prove or to anybody that my truth is my truth. And when you're able to find that peace and can be graceful, grace giving and compassionate towards someone who has a different idea or opinion or strong polarizing belief than you do, it creates space for you to have a different configuration of a relationship, but it doesn't have to be that all or nothing, And then where you focus your attention on is the people, call them family of, chosen family or friends or heart family. You focus on your energy where you feel most reciprocity. And that's how you honor yourself, and eventually what happens is, it just is the way energy works, is that when people who have been butting heads with you realize that you're all of a sudden kind of Teflon-y, they lose interest. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go fight with someone else. And then again, that gives you space to be in some type of relationship there without that tug of war and without the feeling, the abrasiveness. And you have to decide what that looks and feels like, of course, for yourself. But it's in that space of not pushing against, giving grace, allowing people to be who they are, while honoring first and foremost who you are and what feels in alignment to you. And it's that really that truest definition of the personal responsibility that the greater consciousness was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And then at some point you do exit people, or people exit just because the energies don't match up anymore. And it happens a lot less dramatically than, picking up the phone and saying, I never want to speak to any of you again. It's much more, it's much more of a gentle and honoring process for you to come at it in the way that the greater consciousness has been guiding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think really, I had been thinking about it from my own personal emotional struggle, but also just from the greater context of the community and just, the global conversation. How do we unite as, a country, as humanity, if just within, these 9 people, we can't even really come to, some sort of personal, like you're saying, reciprocity or respect of, this is your opinion, this is mine, that's not my story, that's your story, however you want to. So it's just been a struggle. It's just been a struggle.
Completely. And I think that's really the biggest shift that's happening right now, is that there's a story that many of us believe that that peace and cohesiveness comes from getting everybody on the same page, everybody fighting on the same team. And what the greater consciousness is saying and has been saying consistently is that it's this back to this personal responsibility. You do you. And as people come into the awareness of being honoring to their alignment and their personal responsibility, all of a sudden the energy is there for people to come together in ways we've never come together before. So it's sort of like what we were saying to Sarah earlier. It's this and. It's like you can be you and all of you, and I can be me and all of me, and we can come together in this community, in this collective, in this new earth we're forming. But it comes from that place. not
Yeah.
from getting everybody on the same team. It's a very different way that we're being asked to co-create this peaceful experience that's going to carry us through, you
Yeah.
know, the next up leveling of consciousness.
Yeah.
So that's why the message today was so, why they really kind of put the exclamation point on it, because this is the path to that greater peace, to a greater peaceful world, to greater understanding across humanity than anything that is happening now with the fingers pointing and the name calling and the even because the greater consciousness is bringing to my awareness that, you know, what they said earlier of, there are times when may each feel inspired to use our voice, to speak our truth, and less to get everybody on the same team and more to honor the truth that needs to flow through us. And so that's sort of the difference of like not pushing against, but coming into alignment with what feels the best for us and then acting from that place. Yeah. Does
Yes.
that?
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you for such a beautiful question. Everybody's just amazing questions. We've run way over, but are there any other questions?
I was just going to ask a quick one. Do you see a move for me anytime soon? Physical? Or even get a secondary location, something?
Girl, it's coming. It's
Okay.
coming. There's just a few little belief blocks that need to separate themselves, and mostly just about trying to figure out how it's going to happen, you know, and you don't have to figure it out, but the less you try to figure it out, the easier it's coming. But it's coming sooner than you think.
Moving locations.
I see you in 2 locations to start with, but not for long. Not for
Was
long.
there going to be more?
I don't no, I think you'll settle on one, but
Okay.
you'll have both options for a little bit. It's sort of like, you can't make a decision about where you really want to be until you have the opportunity to be in both at the same time. So it's coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. I am so deeply honored and privileged to be able to have these calls with you all. I will be doing another call in what's next month, October. and I really look forward to connecting with you all again soon. I'll be sending the replay out here within the next 24 hours. And if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to respond to the email. I'm happy to answer. And also just a reminder or to let you know, if you aren't aware, that I do host a twice monthly community call that is very similar to this in format. And we allow the greater consciousness to channel, and then we can ask questions, and it's a nice small community of people who are also having the opportunity to get to know each other and to expand the conversations beyond just this one-to-one greater consciousness out. And so if anyone is interested in that, I will put a link about that. It's $25 a month. It's very reasonably priced. And this is a really great time to be in a consistent, like-minded community. If it's not this community I'm speaking about, and you find another community that you can be part of, that will be a lovely way to support yourself through the next several months and years to come. So thank you all.
It's a wonderful community.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Take care.